My son thought I was just a simple woman, a mother who lived quietly, worked an office job, and never had much. He never knew that behind my modest life was a secret I'd kept for decades. The night he invited me to dinner with his wife's wealthy parents, I decided to hide my success and see how they'd treat someone they believed was poor. I didn't know then that one dinner would change everything and reveal who people truly are when they think you have nothing. I never told my son how much money I made. Not once. For 35 years, Marcus has seen me live a modest life, small apartment, same old car, same leather handbag I've carried since he was in high school. To him, I was just his mother who worked hard, came home tired, and cooked simple dinners. Someone ordinary. Someone who had enough, but never much. He never knew that behind those quiet nights and homemade meals, I was earning $40,000 a month. That while he thought I was just another office worker, I was sitting in boardrooms, making decisions that shaped entire regions. That I had built a career from scratch, brick by brick, deal by deal, until I became a senior executive at one of the largest corporations in the country. But I never told him, because I didn't want money to be the thing that defined me. Or worse, the thing that defined him. I grew up in a time when you didn't brag about your paycheck or your title. You didn't need to prove your worth with things that glitter. Dignity was quieter back then. It was in how you carried yourself, how you treated people, how you worked hard and said little. So, I stayed silent. I kept my wealth tucked away where no one could see it, in investments, in savings, in peace of mind. I didn't need the world to applaud me. I just wanted to live decently, humbly, without noise. And for years, that silence served me well. Until one phone call changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus's voice came through the line, nervous, cautious, like the way he used to sound as a little boy when he broke something and didn't know how to tell me. "Mom, I need a favor," he said. "Simone's parents are visiting from overseas. We're having dinner on Saturday. They'd love to meet you." There was a pause, a small, hesitant pause that said everything he didn't. Something in his tone made me uneasy. It wasn't excitement or pride. It was fear. Fear that I'd embarrass him. Fear that I wouldn't fit in. So I asked, gently, "Do they know anything about me?" Another pause. Then, quietly, "I told them you work in an office. That you live alone. That you're simple. You don't have much." Simple. That one word hit harder than I expected. I've been called a lot of things in my life, strong, determined, resilient. But simple. That one stung. Because it wasn't admiration. It was an apology. My son had apologized for me before anyone had even met me. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, the same modest room I've had for decades. The furniture was old but comfortable. The walls were plain. The TV, small. Everything was clean, everything had a story. But I could almost hear the imaginary judgment of strangers in that silence. "This is all she has. This is the mother of our daughter's husband." And right then, something shifted inside me. If they expected to meet a poor woman, someone fragile, naive, and unrefined, then that's exactly who I would let them see. Not because I needed their approval, but because I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to see how they treated someone who had nothing to offer them. Because you can learn everything about people by how they treat those who can't benefit them. So I made a plan. That Saturday, I pulled out the oldest dress I owned, a dull gray one, shapeless and faded. The kind that clings to the body awkwardly and says nothing at all. I slipped on a pair of worn-out shoes, no jewelry, not even a watch. I tied my hair back in a messy ponytail and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. Forgettable, exactly. The kind of woman people overlook in restaurants and pity in conversation. Perfect. When the taxi pulled up, I sat in the back seat and stared out the window as the city passed by, bright lights, Glass towers, luxury cars, couples dressed in designer clothes. I thought about all the years I'd worked in those towers, all the contracts I'd signed, all the men who'd underestimated me because I didn't look like power. And I smiled to myself. Tonight, I was invisible again, but this time, it was by choice. The restaurant was one of those places where the menu doesn't have prices, and where people whisper as if sound itself costs money. I stood outside for a second, taking a deep breath, feeling that old mix of nerves and curiosity, like standing on the edge of something you know will change you, because I had a feeling it would. I hoped, deep down, that I was wrong, that Simone's family would be kind, that Marcus's uneasiness was just in my head. I hoped they would look past the old dress and see the woman who raised their soon-in-law with love and decency. But another part of me, the part that had spent decades in boardrooms, filled with smiles that meant nothing, knew better. People like them, I thought, don't look past appearances. They measure everything in price tags. Still, I pushed the door open and walked inside. The air was warm, the lighting soft and golden, the sound of quiet laughter floating around polished tables. And there, across the room, I saw my son, tall, handsome, nervous. Standing beside him was Simone, elegant as always. Her parents seated like royalty at the far end of the table. My heart beat fast, not because I was intimidated, but because I knew this was it. This was the moment my little social experiment would begin. They thought they were about to meet a poor, naive mother. What they didn't know was that they were about to meet the best actress they'd ever seen. The moment I stepped into that restaurant, I felt eyes turning toward me, not because anyone recognized me, but because I didn't belong there. You can always feel it. That invisible wall between people who belong and people who don't. It's not about the clothes or the money, it's the energy. The unspoken hierarchy that hangs in the air like perfume. And that night, I decided to walk straight through it. Marcus saw me first. He froze. His eyes darted from my wrinkled gray dress to my old shoes, and I could see the color drain from his face. That tiny flicker of panic in his eyes, the kind a child gives when he realizes his secret's about to be exposed, broke something in me. But I smiled anyway. Of course, son, I said softly. I'm here. Simone greeted me with a polite kiss on the cheek, quick, cold, mechanical. Mother-in-law, it's so nice to see you, she said, her smile tight as a thread about to snap. And then she turned toward her parents. They were already seated, the picture of upper-class confidence. Her mother, Veronica, wore an emerald green dress that glittered under the chandelier. Diamonds on her neck, bracelets that jingled when she moved. Her hair pulled back so tightly it looked like it had never known a bad day. Beside her was her husband, Franklin, gray suit, polished watch. The kind of man who thinks silence makes him look important. Both looked at me like they were studying an insect they weren't sure they wanted to touch. I took the empty chair at the far end of the table, the seat people usually leave for unimportant guests. No one offered to help me with my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter handed out menus, heavy and written entirely in French. I opened mine and pretended to squint, like someone who didn't understand what she was reading. Veronica noticed immediately. Do you need help with the menu? She asked, with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, please, I said, playing the part perfectly. I don't understand these words. She sighed gently, like she was doing charity work. I'll order something simple for you, she said. We don't want to overdo it. The word simple again. I bit my tongue and nodded. When the waiter left, conversation began, slow and awkward at first. Then smoother, like a river finding its current. But it wasn't long before Veronica steered it where she wanted, money. She talked about their flight, business class, of course. Their hotel, just something comfortable, she said, casually mentioning it was $1,000 a night. Their rental car, you know. It's so hard to find a decent luxury car when you're abroad. Each sentence was bait, thrown like breadcrumbs to see if I'd follow. I didn't. I just smiled and said, "That sounds lovely." Veronica leaned in, studying my face. Probably disappointed that I didn't look impressed. "You know," she said, "Franklin and I have always been very careful with money. We worked hard, invested wisely. That's why we can live comfortably now." She paused, perfectly timed, and asked, "And you, Alara, what exactly do you do?" I kept my eyes down. "I work in an office," I said quietly. "Mostly paperwork, filing simple things." She nodded slowly, exchanging a glance with her husband. "Ah, administrative work. That's fine. Honest work. All jobs are dignified, right?" "Of course," I said, keeping my voice steady. Inside, I could feel the slow burn of humiliation creeping up my chest, not because of what she said, but because I'd heard that tone 1,000 times in corporate rooms filled with men who thought they were smarter than me. It's the tone of someone who's never truly struggled, pretending to respect you while quietly stepping on your pride. When the food came, Veronica made a show of it. "This steak is $80, she said, slicing into it delicately. "But it's worth it. Quality always is." She looked straight at me. "One can't just eat anything, right, Ilara?" I smiled. "You're absolutely right." Marcus tried to change the subject. Bless his heart, talking about work or travel. But Veronica wasn't done. "So, Alara," she said, tilting her head. "Marcus mentioned you live alone. That must be difficult at your age, without much support. Does your salary cover everything?" It was a trap, but I walked right into it with grace. "I manage," I said softly. "I don't need much." Veronica sighed dramatically. "You are so brave, truly. I admire women who struggle alone. Although, of course, we all wish we could give our children a better life. But, well," she smiled, "everyone gives what they can." I felt the knife in her words, sharp and polished. She wasn't complimenting me. She was reminding me in front of my son that I hadn't been enough. Marcus looked away, jaw tight. Simone stared at her plate. But Veronica continued, almost cheerfully. "We always made sure Simone had the best. Private schools, travel, languages. And when she married Marcus, we helped them to the down payment on the house, the honeymoon, all of it. Because that's what loving parents do." She turned to me again, eyes glittering. "And you, Elara, were you able to help Marcus financially when he got married?" There it was, the dagger, sweetly coated in concern. I met her gaze and said quietly, "Not much. I gave them what I could. A small gift." Veronica smiled. "How thoughtful," she said. "Every little bit helps." Her words dripped with pity, but beneath that pity was poison. And still, I kept smiling. I stayed small, soft, the way poor people are expected to be. But inside, my blood was turning cold. The corporate side of me, the part that once negotiated million-dollar contracts, began to wake up. Because I realized something. This dinner wasn't just about family, it was a performance. And Veronica was performing dominance. Every bite, every word, every look was part of her little show to prove that she and her family were above me. That her daughter had married up, that Marcus's mother was someone to be pitied, not respected. By the time dessert arrived, the humiliation had become almost artful. Veronica ordered a $30 slice of cake with gold flakes on top. "It's exquisite," she said, lifting her fork. "Only the best restaurants offer this." I ordered something simple, a piece of pie. She smiled at me like I was a child who didn't know better. And then, as if she hadn't already done enough damage, she said, "You know, I think it's important that we talk as a family while we're all here. Marcus and Simone are doing so well, and we want that success to continue. But we also want to make sure there are no distractions." I looked up. Distractions? Yes, she said sweetly. At your age, living alone on a limited income, I can imagine it's hard. Marcus must feel responsible for you, wanting to help. But that kind of burden can be hard on a marriage, don't you think? A burden. That's what she called me. I felt Marcus's hand clench on the table, his jaw tighten. Simone looked like she wanted to disappear. Veronica leaned back, confident now. Franklin and I have been thinking, she continued. We'd like to help you financially, a small monthly allowance. Maybe $500 or $700. That way, you can live comfortably, and Marcus won't have to worry so much. In return, we'd just ask that you give them space. Let them build their life together without interference. I stared at her, letting every word sink in. They were offering to pay me to disappear. To buy my absence. To erase me from my son's life for the price of a handbag she probably owned 10 of. I smiled. $700 a month, I said calmly. Veronica nodded, satisfied. Yes, modest, but helpful. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice soft. That's very generous of you, Veronica, truly. Her face lit up with triumph. She thought she'd won. And that's when something inside me shifted. The mask I'd been wearing, that of a timid, broke mother, began to crack. Because I realized something as I watched her gloat. She wasn't powerful. She was terrified. Terrified of losing control. Terrified of people like me, women who built themselves from nothing. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just set the stage for her own downfall. And I, quiet, invisible, underestimated, was about to take back every ounce of dignity she tried to strip from me. For a few long seconds, I didn't say a word. The table fell silent, the kind of silence that hums, thick with arrogance and expectation. Veronica looked pleased with herself. Franklin leaned back with his hands folded like a banker who'd just sealed a deal. And Simone avoided my eyes. Marcus, my son, looked like he was about to break apart right there at the table. I folded my napkin carefully, laid it on the table, and looked up. That's an interesting offer, I said finally, keeping my voice calm. Truly generous of you. Veronica smiled a smile that reeked of victory. I'm glad you think so, she said lightly, reaching for her wine glass. I tilted my head slightly. But just so I understand, how much exactly were you thinking? For this modest allowance. She blinked, surprised by my composure. Well, she said, 500. Maybe $700 a month, depending. I nodded slowly. I see. $700 a month. To disappear from my son's life. Her smile faltered. I wouldn't put it that way, she said quickly, her voice tightening. But that is what you said, I replied. My voice was soft, but something in my tone shifted, and I saw it hit her. The timid, grateful woman she thought she was buying off was gone. I sat up straighter. I didn't raise my voice, but every word landed heavy and deliberate. You said Marcus shouldn't have burdens. You said I should give them space. You said you'd help me, if I stayed away. The color drained from her face. You're misunderstanding. No, I interrupted gently. I understand perfectly. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. Let me ask you something, Veronica. How much did you give Marcus and Simone for their house? She blinked, confused. The down payment? 40,000. 40,000, I repeated, nodding. And for the honeymoon? 15, she said, more defensively now. It was a 3-week trip through Europe. So, I said, leaning back in my chair. You've spent about $55,000 on them. That's generous. She smiled again, nervously. Well, when you love your children, you don't hold back. I met her gaze. That's true, I said softly. When you love your children, you don't hold back. But tell me, Veronica, did that money buy you anything? Her brow furrowed. I'm not sure what you mean. Did it buy you respect? Love, gratitude, or just control? For the first time that night, Veronica had no quick answer. Her husband shifted uncomfortably beside her. Marcus looked at me, eyes wide. Simone's fork clattered against her plate. I smiled faintly. You've spent the entire evening talking about money, what things cost, what you've bought, what you can afford. You haven't asked me once if I'm happy. You haven't asked how I raised Marcus, how we got by, how I managed. All you've wanted to know is how much I'm worth. And now, apparently, I'm worth $700 a month. Mrs. Sterling, Franklin began, his voice stiff. You're misinterpreting our intentions. I turned to him slowly. And what were your intentions, Mr. Davenport? To insult me in silk gloves? To make me feel small enough to thank you for crumbs? He said nothing. I took a slow sip of water. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. The fear that had sat in my chest all evening was gone, replaced by something colder, clarity. I looked at Veronica again. You said you admire women who struggle alone, who are brave. Do you really? Tell me, have you ever struggled alone? Her mouth opened, then closed. Have you ever wondered how you'd feed your child next week? Have you ever worked days while your baby slept with a fever, because you couldn't afford to stay home? Have you ever built something out of nothing? No safety net. No husband. No family money. Just you, a desk, and a will to survive. She was silent. Her diamond earrings caught the light, trembling slightly. Let me tell you something, Veronica, I continued. My voice quieter now, almost gentle. 40 years ago, I was 23. I was a secretary. I lived in a single room with a baby who cried at night because the milk had run out. I ate instant noodles for weeks at a time. Walked to work because the bus was a luxury. I worked until the day I gave birth and went back 2 weeks later. Because no one else was going to take care of us. Marcus was staring at me, his eyes glassy. I had never told him any of this. I studied at night, I said, my voice steady. At the public library. I learned accounting, finance, English. I took courses whenever I could afford them. One day, I was promoted. Then again, and again. I built my life the way some people build skyscrapers, one brick. One sleepless night, one sacrifice at a time. I leaned back, and for the first time that evening, it was Veronica who looked small. And do you know what happened after 40 years? I asked. I made it. I became the regional director of operations for one of the biggest multinational corporations in this country. I oversee 5 countries. I manage budgets of hundreds of millions. I sign contracts people like you would need a team of lawyers to read. Veronica blinked, confused, pale. You what? I smiled faintly. I earn $40,000 a month. That's my salary. Has been for nearly 2 decades. The air around the table changed instantly, like someone had shattered glass. Marcus's mouth fell open. Simone froze. Franklin frowned, like the math didn't make sense. And Veronica just sat there, her hand still gripping the stem of her glass. The color gone from her face. 40,000, I repeated softly. Every month. Not counting bonuses, or investments, or company stock. I have built wealth you can't even measure. Quietly. Without showing it off. Without making anyone feel smaller. Marcus whispered, Mom. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him, at my son, my greatest accomplishment, and smiled. Because you didn't need to know, sweetheart. I wanted you to value effort, not money. To build a life, not chase status. Because money can buy comfort, but it can't buy character. And I wanted you to have character. Simone finally spoke, her voice trembling. But why do you live like that? The small apartment, the simple clothes. Because I don't need to prove anything, I said simply. Real wealth doesn't shout. It whispers. The louder people talk about money, the less they usually have inside. I turned my gaze back to Veronica. That's why I came dressed like this tonight. Why I pretended to be poor? I wanted to see how you'd treat someone you thought had nothing. I paused. And now I know. Veronica's face was red, part rage, part shame. If that's true, she said, her voice trembling, then you deceived us. You made us look like fools. I stood up slowly. My chair didn't make a sound. No, Veronica, I said quietly. I didn't make you look like fools. You did that all on your own. Her lips parted, but no words came. I reached into my canvas tote, that same faded bag I'd carried on purpose, and pulled out a small, black, platinum credit card. I placed it gently on the table in front of her. This is my corporate card, I said. Unlimited limit. Pay for the entire dinner. Leave a generous tip. Consider it a gift from the poor. Naive woman, you tried to buy for $700. The table was dead silent. Veronica stared at the card like it was radioactive. The metallic letters of my name, Elara Sterling, gleamed under the chandelier. When she finally looked up, her eyes weren't proud anymore. They were scared. I don't need your money, she whispered. I know, I said softly. And I didn't need your pity. Then I smiled, not cruelly, just sadly. You can keep your money, Veronica. Because tonight, you finally learned what it can't buy: class, respect, humanity. And for the first time that evening, she had nothing left to say. When I walked out of that restaurant, the night air hit me like a wave, cool, quiet, honest. Behind me, the golden light of the dining room glowed through the glass, and I could still see their silhouettes: Veronica frozen in her seat, Franklin staring down, Simone wiping her eyes, and Marcus, my son, just standing there, looking at me like he was seeing me for the very first time. I didn't wait for anyone to follow. I didn't need to. Some moments are meant to end in silence, and that silence was enough. Outside, the city hummed cars. Laughter, the soft rhythm of life continuing as if nothing had happened. But something had. Not just for them, for me, too. For the first time in years, I felt something heavy lift off my shoulders. I hadn't realized how long I'd been carrying it, the burden of staying quiet. The burden of pretending to be small so others could feel big. I thought I'd mastered the art of humility. But what I'd really mastered was restraint. And sometimes, restraint looks a lot like invisibility. I walked a few blocks before Marcus caught up with me. Mom, he called, breathless. Wait. When I turned, his face was pale, his eyes full of something between shock and guilt. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. All these years. All the things you did, everything you achieved. Why keep it from me? I smiled, the kind of tired motherly smile that carries 1,000 unspoken truths. Because it wasn't about me, I said. You didn't need to grow up chasing what I had. You needed to learn how to build your own life without leaning on mine. He looked down. I told them you were simple, he whispered. I made you sound small. I reached up and touched his cheek. You don't need to apologize, Marcus. You believed what I let you believe. I wanted you to see the value in hard work, in modesty. I didn't want money to change how you saw me or yourself. He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. They treated you horribly. I shrugged. They treated me honestly, at least honestly for who they are. That dinner told me everything I needed to know about them. He frowned. And what's that? That people who measure others by their bank accounts usually have very little in their own souls. We stood there for a moment, both quiet, the sound of traffic washing between us. Then he said, softly, I'm proud of you, Mom. I smiled again, smaller this time, but real. Good, I said. Because I'm proud of me too. That night, when I got home, I slipped out of my wrinkled dress and hung it back in the closet. I looked at myself in the mirror, same face, same tired eyes, same woman. But something inside her had shifted. For years, I'd told myself that power was best kept silent. That humility was my armor. And while that's true, sometimes silence lets people believe you have none. There's a fine line between being humble and letting others diminish you. I learned that line tonight. I sat down on the edge of my bed and thought about Veronica, about her glittering dress, her polished voice, her need to dominate every conversation. It wasn't confidence. It was fear disguised as superiority. People like her, they build their worth out of price tags and compliments. But when you strip away the sparkle, they panic. Because what's left underneath isn't much. And that's the saddest kind of poverty there is. I thought about the offer she made, $700 a month to erase me. I almost laughed. You can't buy dignity. You can't buy the kind of strength that's earned in the dark. When no one's watching. When you're holding your child in one arm and your future in the other. That kind of strength is built, not gifted. And that night, I realized it's the most valuable thing I own. A few days later, Simone called. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Mother-in-law, she said, I didn't know. I'm sorry for how they treated you. I was ashamed that night. But not of you, of them. And of myself. I told her what I wish someone had told me years ago. Don't be ashamed, dear. Just learn. Watch how people treat others who have nothing to offer them. That's who they really are. And promise yourself to never become one of them. There was silence on the line, then a quiet sniffle. I promise, she said. I smiled. Maybe that night changed more than I thought. Sometimes I still think about that dinner, the cold stares, the cutting smiles, the way money was used like a weapon. But then I think about the ending. About the look on Veronica's face when she realized the woman she tried to humiliate had been holding the cards. All of them, the entire time. Not because of wealth. Not because of power. But because I never lost who I was. And that's what I wish every woman, every mother, could understand. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. Not with money, not with clothes, not with titles. The people who can't see your value without all that aren't your people. That night didn't make me richer. It didn't make me stronger. It just reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That real power doesn't come from what you earn. It comes from knowing you can walk away head high, heart light from a table that never deserved your presence in the first place.